Excuse me, sir, have you seen any evil?
I'm afraid I have seen no evil today.
Rats. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Critically Acclaimed, the podcast where highbrow and lowbrow collide.
Was that a question?
Yes.
All right.
My name is Wim Bibiani. I'm a film critic for the internet. Everybody calls me Bibbs.
My name is Whitney Seibold. I, too, am one of those film critics on the internet.
Where do you write for? We actually never say this. Where do you write
such
for?
a rare animal we are. My written work appears on IGN, and it also appears on the criticallyacclaimed.net website from time to time.
That's right. And you can also find me at criticallyacclaimed.net, IGN, and The Wrap. Huzzah.
You're moving up in the world.
Ooh.
You're at The Wrap.
We have a jam-packed episode this week. We have a ton of new movies to review. We've got our double feature, which is a real fun one. And we're going to try to cram in some letters if we have time. But Whitney has a hard out because you have a job.
I actually have, yeah. In addition to being a film critic, I also have a job that requires, like, time clocks and being in a place at a certain time.
So we're just going to speed through. Let's. So this week we're going to be reviewing Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Both of them.
The First Purge. The Legacy of a Whitetail Deer Hunter, Fireworks, and Sorry to Bother You. We're also going to be reviewing the notorious WWE slasher movie See No Evil, and we've got a fun double feature paired up for that. Let's start
I
with...
know we're coy up front about what the double feature is going to be, even though the title of our episode lists what it is.
People don't read. That's why we have podcasts.
So we can kind of sneak it in on the people who aren't being attentive to the title.
I'm saving it for a dramatic build-up.
I understand.
What a thrill.
What would you like to review first?
Well, let's start with the biggest release of the weekend.
Which one is that?
It's Ant-Man and the Wasp. It made a lot of money.
Did it? I haven't been paying attention.
It made a fair amount of money. I love it when
it made more than the first one.
Well, Ant-Man and the Wasp made, when last I checked, it was like $76 million over the weekend.
It's pretty big for an Ant-Man movie.
Well, it's pretty big in general, but compared to like Infinity War, which made like $70 trillion in the first day, everyone's like, oh, is Marvel lost? It's Ant-Man.
It's Ant-Man.
It's not one of the marquee titles. It's going to do just okay. But $76 million is still a freakish amount of money.
In fact, I think that's a good place to start with Ant-Man. Even though I'm not the hugest fan of the Ant-Man movies, I think they're both just fine. They're light. I like Paul Rudd. He's not at the height of his powers, but he's doing well.
Yeah.
I do like that this series, which is now 20 films long, does have, like, it's reserving the Ant-Man films for, like, a breather.
Yeah,
like after anything where this, like, in most of these the big Marvel Avengers movies, the stakes are always the fate of the universe. Typically,
half the universe is last time, but yeah,
half the universe. Like there's just a big city's going to crash into the world. We had a Spider-Man film where the big tension was, am I going to join the football team? But for the most part, it's been countries and nations and universes and big energy portholes sucking planets and billions of people dying, and they have sewn into their own fabric a sort of mini franchise within the franchise where they do get to have the stakes be deliberately low for once.
Well, you know what? One thing I like about Marvel, and I think that a lot of people accuse their Marvel movies of being kind of samey, and on some levels, yeah, most of them capture the same kind of quippy, casual, fun to watch, not terribly serious tone.
Yeah. I think that's why people like Black Panther so much. He didn't quip, not once. He wasn't a quippy guy.
He wasn't a quippy guy. He had a sense of humor, but he wasn't like a jokester.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Marvel is making a series of movies that all feel like they're in the same universe. You want to go to a Marvel movie and you want to get what you expect from a Marvel movie, but they've been pretty good about making sure each one of the individual franchises has its own kind of identity. And like Thor, for example, it gets really freaking weird.
Well, especially with this last one.
Even if you look at like the second one, we've got elves who are going to remake the Earth and magic energy and naked guys at Stonehenge. It's pretty weird. And we're just going to embrace that it's weird. We got Captain America, who tries to be a bit more serious and severe about politics, either of the 1940s or today. You've got Spider-Man, who's really got the secret identity / teen angst thing down. And you got Ant-Man, and there's a couple of things that make Ant-Man distinctive. One, it's a series of heist movies, and that's kind of fun. Two, it's a story about a father. And that's something we actually don't have. There aren't a lot of dads running around in the MCU.
There aren't a lot of families, and don't pull out that Loki and Thor brothers thing.
That's a totally different vibe.
Yeah,
it's a totally different vibe.
That's not. It barely even counts. Like, it doesn't even. They don't even register as siblings to me.
Yeah.
Paul Rudd has a young child,
and I think in this one in particular, in Ant-Man and the Wasp, and I like the last one fine. It felt like a bit of a relic of this sort of 1990s, early 2000s self-contained superhero movie thing.
It's my favorite element of it, but
fair enough. I'm not even saying that's bad, but that was its vibe. Here in Ant-Man and the Wasp, we have a story about a guy who is struggling to keep everything balanced. He's struggling to be a superhero, run a business, take care of his family, be a good friend, try to be a boyfriend, try to be a good moral person. Like, he's trying to put all these things together, usually in these superhero stories from Marvel, because Marvel quickly abandoned the whole idea of secret identities.
Yeah.
Most people can just be pretty focused. Iron Man only really has to worry about the A-plot and how drunk he is. Like, that's it. That's pretty straightforward. Ant-Man's life is really, really complicated. And I like that they at least attempted...
In a relatable human way.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you take out the superhero elements, and this is any parent. This is any person who has responsibilities in a large family. This is... That in and of itself makes this rather distinctive in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I like that about it. My biggest problem with this movie is that I feel like in trying to balance all those things, it lets some of the plates that are spinning crash.
Well, the stakes are so relatable. He owns a business. That's my favorite element. Is he's a small business owner, and he's got coworkers that he has to talk to, even though he's under house arrest.
I like that his business is the business from sneakers. Like,
they sneak into people to test their security system.
Well, I don't know if he sneaks into them or not, but our thing is, look, we're cons. We're ex-cons. We know how to break into your place. We'll prevent other people from doing it.
Yeah,
cute. Yeah.
But yeah, since the stakes are so human, when the action really gets going and we were introduced to all these new characters and all these other supervillains and characters who know each other and all these new supporting cast, it gets to be too much of a muchness. It's like, and then like the whole... Like, Walton Goggins, for instance, plays some sort of shady tech dealer who's been giving tech to Hope.
Hope Van Dyne and Hank Pym. Michael Douglas and Evangeline
the first Ant-Man and the Wasp. He's been giving them like tech so they can build an ultra shrinker so they can go into what they call quantum space and retrieve Michelle Pfeiffer, who might still be there.
Can we all agree to just call it the microverse? When I was growing up, it was called the microverse.
I don't remember. I did not encounter Ant-Man in the comics a lot.
Not even Ant-Man. I just remember like Reed Richards going into the microverse. Like that's just what I thought it was called. I did that in my review, and I'm like, I'm not fixing that. It's the microverse.
She's stuck in the microverse. They want an ultra shrinking. They want a shrink tunnel to go into the microverse.
Yeah.
They're using giant ants to build it. That's kind of fun.
Yeah.
But then they go to Walton Goggins to get these parts. They could just say, we've been getting these parts from shady means. But they have to give that character a face, and they have to give him a bunch of henchmen, and now he's involved in the story.
He's trying to steal the shrinker. Yeah.
While we also have this mysterious character that they just call the Ghost, who is just sort of constantly phasing in and out and of like the visual spectrum. Like, she's invisible sometimes, and sometimes she's not.
And she can walk through.
And she can walk through solid matter.
And the idea is that her superpower is killing her.
Yeah, her story is she's trying to find a way to stop her superpower from powering. We only need one of those to make this a movie.
Especially Walton Goggins, because I like Walton Goggins a lot. Walton Goggins is a really fun, really talented actor. He doesn't need to be in this movie. There's enough going on.
Yeah.
All he really does is he adds his little X factor where what happens is over the course of the film, the shrinking device is in like an office building. They shrink the office building to the size of a suitcase.
They carry it like a piece of luggage. It even has a handle, which is cute.
I love it when it's big and you can see the handle being huge. All that stuff is funny. But like the whole thing is they've got this building, it's the size of like the box from the end of Seven. And they're just like, everyone's stealing the building back and forth.
Yeah.
That's fun. I like all of that. We don't need 80 different people doing that. And it just ends up feeling like the movie is getting distracted. When you have a movie about someone whose attentions are divided, the movie needs to be extra clear.
Extra focused.
Extra focused, extra clear. And the movie seems to only really think that the whole Hank Pym, Hope Van Dyne rescuing their Hope's mom from the microverse, like that's kind of the only thing that's important. I love I love Ant-Man's friends.
Yeah.
Michael Pena, he's really funny.
Michael Pena is a national treasure.
I love him. He's a great actor. He's really, really funny in this. But like, the movie just uses him as like a gag. Well, that should also be important. And
there's also a funny scene, though, where he's like caught by spies and injected with truth serum and starts rambling about Morrissey, which is really hilarious. Yeah. Like, they give him truth serum and he starts telling the truth about everything from like day one.
That's a funny gag. We don't really need it in the movie. No, the movie's already dense enough.
It keeps the tone light. And unfortunately, it was one of the bad guys instead of the other one, when really you just needed one antagonist.
Yeah, the Ghost could have totally done that. Or the other person who's working with the Ghost. He didn't need... That's my point. Is the movie is just, it's kind of throwing everything at the wall and not all of it stacks.
Yeah,
but I do like it a lot. I think Paul Rudd he's a real charmer. Mm-hmm. I like what's the name of the woman who plays the Ghost? It's Hannah. Is it Hannah John Kamen?
I looked her up just a second ago.
Yeah, Hannah John Kamen. She's a really good actor. She's really intimidating presence. Mm-hmm. And I wish the movie hadn't gotten so distracted, because I actually just thought her whole deal was very sympathetic and relatable. I think she's an interesting character. I'd like to have seen more of her, but we had to keep moving around.
The Ghost and the Michael Douglas character have like similar goals, so it's written very well together. So yeah, to have Walton Goggins as this extra X Factor is just too much. It's almost 2 hours long. It needs to be 90. That's with credits.
And it also raises the thing where everything moves so fast that you start to, like, you don't really notice how, like, it doesn't actually make that much sense. Like, there's this time limit. They have to get Michelle Pfeiffer out of the microverse within, like, a day. Yeah. I'm trying to remember the exact time limit, but it's real short. The Ghost needs to use that shrinking device in order to fix herself within 2 weeks. So use it after.
Do both.
Yeah.
Porque no los dos.
Right. There's no reason not to do both. Well, like, it's kind of insane. They should have just offered that. Listen, we have to do this thing right now. As the second she's out, we will use this on you and it'll work.
There might have been like one vague line of dialogue, but yeah, there's no reason why the Ghost couldn't have just said, "Hey, I have this problem. Can you help me?" And there's no reason they would have said no.
I mean, you could argue that Hank Pym is kind of selfish, but especially once she steals their shit and just be like, "Oh, you're really motivated and you'll be a real pain in our ass if we don't help you. Yeah, we'll help you." Done. It's pretty simple. They're heroes. They're not evil.
I appreciate a lot of the action sequences because they needed to innovate. Shrinking is, at the end of the day, a boring power. It's one of those ones by itself. It's one of those powers that a lot of writers of comic books go to time and again, and it's really rare that people are able to find a way to make it interesting. In the Ant-Man movies, they have switched it up in that it's not just shrinking but also growing, and you can also grow other things from a distance. They kind of expand on the power a little bit. So sadly they had this shot in the preview, but there's a bit where they throw a Pez machine at someone and grow it to the length of a bus, and it just sort of knocks over a car.
That's a hoot.
It's fun to watch. It's fun stuff. Or they shrink their own car, drive underneath another car, and then grow to regular size and just throw the car in the air. That's really fun.
That's a really fun, like, all the action in this is like really inventive. Yeah. And they do everything they can possibly think of for now with the size-changing powers. That's a real blast. And I do like that they at least attempted to tell what you could call a human story with this. It isn't just about a heist. It is about a dad trying to find balance. It is about a guy who has failed the people in his life. He's failed his daughter. He's failed the Pym family. And he's trying to make good on that, even though it might end up costing him his freedom. Because after Captain America Civil War, he's been under house arrest for 2 years, which is fair. Okay, that's good start, we're really screwed.
I've heard that they had to use the house arrest. A lot of people are saying the house arrest was the excuse as to why that character didn't appear in Infinity War.
Actually, once you see like the whole movie, that actually doesn't make sense.
Well, it doesn't make sense, and also, what does Iron Man care about some guy's house arrest? What does the Guardians of the Galaxy care about one guy's house? Or just take him. It doesn't matter.
They don't give a shit.
We need your help. The universe is at stake here.
At the beginning of the movie, the second Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne Hope Van Dyne need him, they just take him out of there. And
they can just kidnap him.
By the way, they replace him with a giant ant who wears like his collar, that
his ankle bracelet.
Yeah, and they program him to do all the things he does all day, like take a bath and play drums. That part is great.
Watch it, and I think a lot of the ant effects were practical, which I really appreciated.
It looks like a it looks like a fun movie to make, and oftentimes that doesn't always translate to a good movie. Here, it translates to a somewhat entertaining movie.
It's an entertaining movie,
and I think some people try to lob that as some sort of insult at Marvel, like, oh, they made like entertainment. That's what I want.
Well,
there's nothing wrong with that. You can argue
that's what you go to a big summer blockbuster to see sometimes.
Now, you can argue that that's a lower bar to hit than what, say, the Warner Brothers was trying to do with Batman v Superman.
Yeah.
You can argue that's a fair argument. They still hit it, and they hit it consistently. Like, the worst MCU movie is still pretty entertaining. Like, it's still not like... I still wouldn't, like, walk out of the theater angry and ask for my money back. Like, it's still, like, okay.
There's only one or two I'd give more than 3 stars to, but...
a few more from me, but not most.
Yeah, maybe 3, but... I'm a big fan of the first Iron Man, and I still see that one as kind of divorced from the series because it was made before a lot of the plans were put into motion.
Yeah, you can really see that with, like, Incredible Hulk. Like, they didn't really know what they were going to do about integrating the universe. But I maintain, and I recently wrote an article about it, that Incredible Hulk is really underrated, and a lot of the things people complain about with Marvel movies now, that movie kind of addresses. It's a really emotionally intense storyline. It can be told on its own. It doesn't feel like all of its connections to the outside universe are pretty small but organic. It's well acted. There's a great love story in it. It's good.
It's when you get to the Hulk on Hulk fight that everything just falls apart.
It's gotta lead to a big fight. That's what you want. You don't want the Hulk to play chess at the end.
Like, wouldn't that be great, though?
It's okay, yes, that would be great.
It's like, I'll let you through, but you have to play chess. But I'm too mad, I can't cut it. Okay, I
gotta use the illusion defense.
Pawn to rook 4. Good, you're holding it together. How do you feel? I'm mad. It'd be a freaking great movie. What are you talking about? The Hulk has to stay calm enough to do something that requires a little bit of concentration, and that's a lot of drama for him.
The kitten is staring at me because I'm busting. Oh, hi, kitten.
But yeah,
we have an audience.
But yeah, this is if you want to rank it this way, this is like a lesser film in the series. But because that's by design, I can accept that just fine. It's fine. It's fine.
I like it fine. Let's talk about the First Purge. Where do you stand on the Purge movies?
I like the Purge election year a lot. I think the films were getting gradually better there for a second until we hit this one. It's not bad. It's just a step down. The first one is pretty awful. It had a really great idea. This notion that in the near future, this new extreme right-wing political party will instill a 12-hour period every year where you get to commit murder with no consequences.
Yeah.
Or just a certain number of crimes.
Most crime is legal. You can't, like, blow up a building, but, like, beyond that, you never hear anyone pulling a heist. You notice that? Like, there's never just, we're going to rob the bank.
It wasn't until this last time that we got, like, indecent exposure. We don't have, like, just flashers running around. It's like, I can be naked in public now. Whee! Yeah, and this new one, we have a couple having sex on a hood of a car. It's like, well, that's legal tonight.
But the first Purge was really, really weird because when you think about that premise, you think about the mayhem in the streets. And you think about the kind of political regime that would use that kind of abominable level of control in order to keep the masses either placated or sort of hypnotized and, like, grateful that we get to commit murder now.
It's a film that it should have been made in 1988, and it should have been made by John Carpenter, quite frankly, because all of those political underpinnings aren't really explored in the first one. It becomes kind of a not very well-made home invasion film.
Well, what's weird is that the first one decides that the most interesting... In theory, what if we could only make one of these? What if it's not a hit? Yeah. So the first one we're gonna do is about a rich white family in a gated community, and they're trying not to let people in their house. And I'm like, that's not really the focus, because that one's a movie about how rich white people realize that the world doesn't revolve around them, and that for
that one night they're targets.
Well, and that family, the Ethan Hawke's family in that movie, they make their money off of securing people's houses for the purge. They're making money off of this corrupt and unjust system. So it's all about them learning a valuable lesson about that. And I think it's interesting that that's where they thought the target demo would be.
Yeah.
And then in the Purge Anarchy, we took to the streets. And in the Purge election year, we really hammered home the sort of cultural divide.
Like there were certain like levels of political assassination that were suddenly made legal, which of course was just those in charge trying to kill off an opponent.
Yeah. It was the conservatives trying to kill off the liberals, and indeed the protagonist of the Purge election year was very clearly a Hillary Clinton analog.
Yeah.
And at the end of the Purge election year, the spoiler alert for the Purge election year, I guess skip ahead a little bit, but she won, and they were going to outlaw the Purge, and then the whole country started purging all at once, as though the holiday was all the time, which was a fucking amazing cliffhanger. And then Hillary Clinton didn't win. And it feels like we
got to walk this back a little bit.
It feels like what they were building to this really wasn't as relevant as where the idea of the Purge started, and now
we're in a like Hillary Clinton didn't win the presidency, and we're in a different political landscape. And the Purge has to now address that, because these are very assertively political movies that are commenting very openly about the politics of the time.
Rather bluntly, maybe not as in-depth as one might like, but they are definitely political films.
Yeah, they're not the most intelligent movies, but at least there's an idea in them. And now they're making a movie based on the current political climate. They can't really go from where they left off, so they go back to the first Purge, creating a semantic nightmare, because how do we refer to the Purge now?
The Purge.
The Purge.
Yeah.
So if I'm discussing the series as a whole and I want to refer to the first movie, I just have to say The Purge. It's like the headache of now there's three films called Halloween.
The original Purge.
The original Purge.
For Halloween, you can say John Carpenter's Halloween, Rob Zombie's Halloween,
David Gordon Green's Halloween.
Even the first Purge, even though this one is directed by a new filmmaker, James DeMonaco, who created the series and directed the first three installments, did write it. Yeah. So calling it James DeMonaco's The Purge might not necessarily be whatever. So
the first Purge, is about the first Purge, and it was staged as originally in the course of the film as an experiment only on Staten Island. Specifically, only on a really single impoverished neighborhood in Staten Island.
Well, that's where our focus is.
That's
in theory, it's the entire island.
Yeah. But Marissa Tomei plays a psychologist who wants to sort of put this theory into practice, that if people are allowed to enact their most violent fantasies without consequences, that will be good for their psyche.
The first Purge begins with like a montage of news footage. I'm not sure if all of it was real, but it all looked like something we'd see on the news right now. Nations divided, protests on both sides, economic disparity. Just go on Twitter and just randomly scroll around and you'll see anger. And every single person who is going to participate in this experiment there's a little short aside for a lot of them as the government in a white room asks them questions, and the question everyone gets asked is, are you angry? And the answer is always yes.
I'm angry about something.
Everyone's angry about something, and lately it feels like there's plenty to be angry about no matter who you are. So the idea is, what are we going to do with all this anger? It's ripping the country apart. Well, if everyone just has a release valve... And it's this kind of idea that like sounds okay when you're 19 years old
and you're high
and it's 3 a.m. and you just finished watching the first Purge, or not the first Purge, the original Purge. Damn it, that is confusing.
Yeah, see what did I say?
But like for a second, you think to yourself, like, yeah, man, what if? And then you sober up or you grow the fuck up and you realize that's a stupid and terrible fucking idea.
You know what? We have to blow off steam? Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Yeah,
you go see a movie,
relax, enjoy.
You have sex with someone you love.
Go bowling. Something. There's all sorts of ways.
read a book. Go for a walk.
Marissa Tomei has this really terrible fringe, shitty idea, and the New Founding Fathers, which is this splinter political group, this ultra-conservative group that has achieved power in America, controls the government.
Very, very thinly veiled Trumpism in the film.
Oh, I mean, the advertisement actually uses the red hats and everything.
Yeah.
They know what they're doing. And the idea is they're going to use this, and their party line is, it's just this psychological experiment. We're trying to heal the nation. But by the end of the movie, they're very, very clear. There are too many people, and people there are too many people, and people hate paying taxes. So we have to figure out some way to make the economy work. And the solution is fewer people. And if we get the people to do it themselves, Problem solved.
Well, fewer poor people is the thing. Let's kill off all of the poor people, and that was addressed very vividly in election year. How they started like jacking up insurance rates on purge insurance.
Yeah.
So like poor shop owners can't afford it, but wealthy people can. And
rather notably, the First Purge, the first experiment that they try, is in poor minority communities on Staten Island, and indeed, most of the speaking roles in this movie are not white people.
Yeah, the bad guys are most of the government agents. I think there was maybe one or two that weren't white, but most of them are white.
Mostly white.
And here was an interesting. And I'm not sure if I'm reading a little too much into this, but the people who are participating in the purge, they're given. Like a little kit by the government agents.
They're giving contact lenses so
and
that
they're
they
given
can film what
contact
they're
lenses,
seeing.
and they need to film what they're seeing, which if they put these in, it means they're going to go out and commit violence. They have violence in their minds. Young black man puts on these blue contact lenses.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I noticed that, too. It's not subtle.
It's like, Toni Morrison violence version. This is good. The bluest eye.
Yeah. If you haven't read The Bluest Eye, someone probably thought of that.
I kind of hoped that all of the contacts were blue, but it turns out they were all different colors, and it made for a really creepy visual in certain scenes where you could see like people's eyes like piercing through the darkness.
Yeah, that part was creepy. There's a couple of things with this movie. First off, I really do, as blunt as it is, I appreciate the attempt to tell a severe political allegory for this. It's hard not to look at this experiment taking place on Staten Island with minority communities and not think about the Tuskegee experiments. The idea that, we have this experiment the government wants to do, but we don't know if it's going to work and it might hurt a lot of people, so we're not going to start with the white people.
Yeah.
And it's just, someone knew that was a thing, and they're really going for it. And sure enough, what's really fascinating is over the course of the film, people aren't really killing each other. There's a few, right at the beginning, just some people who are mentally ill and just are looking for an excuse. Most people are just partying extra hard.
Yeah.
And that confuses Marissa Tomei. She was like, this demographic isn't behaving the way I thought they would. And I'm like, that sounds really racist, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And so what they do it isn't until the white people show up wearing Nazi fetish gear, and Ku Klux Klan robes. Then they start going nuts. And again, the movie is very obvious political allegory.
And those are like real Klansmen and real Nazis that they're like shipping in from other places to like make it look like there's more violence within the community when really it's just a bunch of racists murdering non-white people.
If you're into the Purge for the mayhem, which anarchy had
that
galore.
Was pretty much all anarchy really
and
had.
Purge anarchy was mostly mayhem. Election year was more thoughtful mayhem, but still tons of mayhem.
A lot of crazier mayhem in that one, too.
This one, the whole point is that this Purge is maybe the least eventful Purge ever. So the downside is, this is the least eventful Purge movie.
Yeah.
So if you're into the mayhem, it spikes towards the end. Like, it builds. But for a while, it's actually like pretty low on the violence. And I like that there's a point to that, which is that people aren't as violent as you thought. And that a lot of the people who are like gonna take advantage of an excuse to be terrible aren't people to whom society is already shitty to.
Yeah.
Like if you're already, like the people who already have power and want to exploit it more, they go nuts for this. Everyone else is just like, well, let's hang out tonight, like it's not really a thing.
I was really, really hoping that there would be like a public orgy in the park. It's like make love, not war.
That would be fun.
Yeah.
But that's not what happens. I respect a lot of what this movie is going for. I was thinking about our conversation last time about Sicario and how that film's politics, which are just as cartoonish in a lot of ways, and why we had a problem.
Far more stern,
and why we had a problem with that, and why the First Purge may not be amazing, but why it works better. It's because this is a heightened sci-fi allegory.
Yeah.
And you can get away with even a...
It's a speculative future, not any sort of comment on the way the present is or ought to be.
Yeah, it's less repugnant if they go to some sort of ugly extreme. Because there is that distance. Sicario is like trying to play itself off as this is happening today.
Super relevant. It wears its politics on its sleeve. Really.
And so when it doesn't feel relevant, or when it feels like super alarmist to a really irresponsible degree, that one feels like it's falling short because the movie is trying to be taken super seriously. The Purge wants you to care about what's happening, but they also know that it's really, really broad. There is a reference, a very specific reference to Donald Trump, which I will not ruin for you. But it's in there, and when that moment comes, you know that that's the filmmakers telling you, we know this is crazy. We know this is absurd, and we do appreciate that, and we do want to have some fun while we try to make a salient point.
Yeah, and while we're in this sort of resurge of very extreme right-wing ideology sort of taking control of America, I find it interesting that The Purge has to essentially dial it back a little bit. Because
it seems more plausible now.
It seems more plausible, and it's harder to satirize something that's so extreme. I was introduced to the term recently, Poe's Law, where something has become so extreme in the world that you can no longer satirize it by exaggerating. If you exaggerate something, it just seems like the next step for that thing.
Yeah.
It's not making it seem silly anymore. You're not pushing it to any sort of logical extreme.
That's where we've hit here, yeah.
Yeah, and we've kind of hit Poe's Law with the First Purge. And I think there's something we can do with the First Purge, but I think they didn't really nail it with this movie.
I don't think they nailed it. I think they came close enough that I still appreciate it, and I'm a big fan of this franchise.
Yeah.
Even the misstep of the first one, I think it's interesting as part of the tapestry. I think this is one of the most forthrightly confrontational, mainstream sort of movie franchises that we've got.
Yeah.
You know, they make money, they're popular, and yet they're not afraid to really be bold. And even when they miss, they swung hard. Yeah. And credit for that. Honestly, I'll give them a lot of credit for that.
I'm still, ever since Dave White, fellow film critic, brought it up, I'm still eagerly awaiting for a Very Purge Christmas.
Right? Doesn't that seem like it writes itself? Yeah.
Like, things are especially bad. We're going to have okay. So people are out in a mall. They're shopping on Christmas Eve. It's 5 p.m. Stores are, they're going to stay open, but people are getting increasingly frantic. And all of a sudden, with no warning whatsoever, the alarms go off and they say, guess what? It's a purge starting right now.
Yep. I imagine this is sort of a Doctor Strangelove kind of thing where some guy just hit the button.
Yeah, and that would be it. And, people are starting to
but here's what I
question
understand.
The authenticity of it.
You call it The Purge, War on Christmas.
Oh, there you go.
That's the title.
There you go, The War on Christmas.
I know A Very Purge Christmas sounds good, but that's going to really ruin my proposed sequel for A Very Step-Up Wedding.
Oh, okay.
So eventually we're going to get
We can have both.
That's true. I would love to see a crossover between Step Up and The Purge. We're going to dance. We're going to dance so hard it's illegal.
Only on Purge night can we do the forbidden dance.
Let's move on. I want to talk about a new Netflix movie called The Legacy of a Whitetail Deer Hunter. It stars Josh Brolin and Danny McBride.
God, Josh Brolin's on fire, isn't he?
He's in everything right now.
He's going to get the Jude Law Ubiquity Award this year.
There you go. It's directed and co-written by Jody Hill, who did Observe and Report. And Observe and Report has a big cult following. It seems like this might be real exciting. So it stars Josh Brolin as a hunter who has his own cable show. Excuse me. He hunts whitetail deers around the world. Apparently they're everywhere. I don't know. And with his loyal camera person, Dan McBride, by his side, and his son is now old enough to go hunting. And this is the big episode where he's going to shoot his first deer. But wouldn't you know it, they get out into the woods and the kid won't get off of his cell phone. Kid's more worried about his girlfriend. Kid's not all that invested in hunting. And it turns out that Josh Brolin, he's divorced. He has nothing else in his life other than the show. He's not really nice to his only friend in the world, Danny McBride. This weekend is all about him, really, and not all about him and his son. And he has a valuable lesson to learn by the end of it. Snore. I'm not one of these people.
Is it just a lot of like wandering through the woods talking about feelings?
A lot of it, and they try to spike it up by having them talk about things that are like wildly inappropriate, like, oh, well, you're a man this weekend, so we can talk about man things. And then Danny McBride talks about he and his wife have orgies, and Josh Brolin's like, don't talk about that.
Danny McBride probably improvised, but
no, they had pictures.
Oh, jeez,
they made pictures for it. Like, here, let me show you. Like, It feels like they're trying to like spike up this very sort of conventional sort of father-son bonding movie with like some inappropriate humor or a little bit stronger character work than we're used to in this sort of very familiar, because there's like a 1990s version of this with Chevy Chase or Daniel Stern. You know what I'm talking about, starring Jonathan Taylor Thomas. In fact, I think there actually was a movie, Man of the House, with Jonathan Taylor Thomas and Chevy Chase.
Oh, I think Man of the House was with Macaulay Culkin. But...
Was it Macaulay Culkin? I was thinking of Getting Even with Dad.
Oh, I am thinking of Getting Even with Dad.
Yeah, that was with Ted Danson. But you see what I mean?
They're all the same.
There's a lot of these things, and I think the idea is we're going to take this genre and we're going to try to approach it just a teensy bit more seriously. Problem is, the genre is super thin, and there really isn't enough material here for the actors to work with. It's a good cast. Josh Brolin really, in particular, he's just really seems to really get this character, and I believe him in all of that character's reality. But the story is very familiar. The plot is very conventional, and ultimately every conclusion they come to is pretty trite. I would have loved to have seen them really subvert this and get like really weirdly dark in some way. Like the son like just refuses the dad's bonding, and it gets so bad dad starts chasing him through the woods with a gun. Like it could have.
This is our bonding experience. I'm going to hunt you.
You could have gone really nuts with it. Like that would have been kind of interesting. And it feels like they're flirting with that kind of danger. And instead, it feels like they're being just classy enough that they're hoping you don't notice how conventional this movie is. Also, I didn't laugh once. That's not a good sign. It's just not terribly funny. It's droll. I get that there are jokes.
Okay.
But it's just kind of there. And I think this sort of typifies a lot of the content on Netflix right now, where they're picking up these movies, they were at a festival or something like that, and they're okay, but they were never going to be blockbusters, but they're still too well made. To like go straight to that straight to DVD kind of, that's sort of the latest Steven Seagal movie doesn't belong there. Netflix has got this like middle of the road.
Yeah, there was
this
a time,
is pretty good considering I'm already paying for my subscription.
Yeah, there was a time when this kind of movie would have gotten a little bit more screenwriterly attention, and it would have been released theatrically, and that was the mid-budget film. But those don't exist in the same way they used to. So now they're all going to Netflix, and as a result, Netflix isn't the studio that's stepping in and saying, hey, we're going to pay for reshoots, or, we're going to make sure that this is okay before we put it on our platform. They're just acquiring. Yeah. They're just acquiring these films that weren't quite good enough.
But have a good cast, good production values. Again, I'm already paying for my subscription. This new Josh Brolin movie is on here. It's well shot. I got my money's worth. Like, that's it. I didn't have to go pay for parking. So I think Netflix is like slowly lowering our standards, and every time they do put out something amazing, like Mudbound, or one of their better TV shows like Glow, we're like, oh my god, Netflix does amazing stuff. Netflix is like Marvel Studios. It's like everything's okay,
except like 85% is Ant-Man.
Yeah, there you go. Like, it's just like, it's okay.
Yeah. That's all right.
Usually not crap. Sometimes.
I really like that Lost in Space. I don't watch a lot of their original stuff.
Yeah, that was good. Yeah. All right. And then we're going to end on Sorry to Bother You, because I know you really want to talk about that. So I'm going to make it real fast. The other movie I saw that you didn't is a new anime film called Fireworks. And I actually want to get the international title.
Fireworks is the American title.
Fireworks is the shortened American title. The Japanese title
is it This World Then the Fireworks?
No, although every time I see fireworks, I always say to myself, well, we just passed this world.
And you look around the car, and everybody looks at you with stony stares, and then somebody punches you in the arm.
Most people don't even get the joke. They just sort of... There's a movie called This World Then the Fireworks. Moving on.
It's a pretty good one. It's this weird, incest romance with Gina Gershon and Billy Zane.
Yeah, it's super weird.
It's good, and Cheryl Lee. It's a good movie.
Yeah. The full title is Fireworks. Should we see it from the side or the bottom?
I'm glad they shortened it. That's a bit of a mouthful.
It's an unwieldy title, and it ties into an element of the film that seems completely superfluous until it is everything. And it's a story about a bunch of young teenagers. And one of them is a young woman who, unbeknownst to everyone else, is going to be forced to move out of town like tomorrow. And a bunch of guys have a crush on her. She has a swim race.
Why is she being forced out of town?
Her mother is getting remarried and they got to move right away. Okay. So she goes in a swim race with two guys who have a crush on her. And she wins, and for a prize, they have to do whatever she wants. And she decides to herself that whoever comes in second, she will ask him to take her out on a date to see. There's this huge fireworks display.
Okay.
They have tonight. That's like her last
second
pick her
place.
up.
We'll get that.
Yeah, the guy who wins, not the guy who comes in last.
Right.
So this guy wins. He decides to stand her up, and then she's really unhappy. And then the guy who lost, who actually really, really liked her a lot, can't believe this guy would do that, to like blow her off to hang out with her friends, because his friends got in a huge argument about whether fireworks are flat or spherical.
Okay.
Because their whole thing is, well, they look flat, right? I mean, don't they just like sort of flatten out like in a circle? It's like, no, they're a firework. It's gunpowder. It's going to explode in every direction, right? And they'll have an argument. Where should we see the fireworks? If we see it from this side, we'll know for certain.
All right.
They are not flat. It's a kind of stupid teenage argument where, like, we could look this up really fast, but we want to think of ourselves as logical, so we have a debate about it, and it's really stupid.
You know what? You're practicing debate. You're figuring out logic. You're on your way. It's fine.
But it's a debate that's really silly to have in a movie, because everyone at home is just going, they're not flat. What the hell are you talking about? It's like in Shaun of the Dead, dogs can't look up. Yes, they can. They have eyes and necks. Yes, they can do that. So this guy blows her off. The other guy ends up seeing how despondent she is about it, and then she's dragged away by her mom. And then he, with like this pebble that she found earlier that day that looks really weird, he gets really, really mad and wishes he had won that race. And then time reverses itself.
It's a wishing pebble, okay.
Yeah, time reverses itself, and he wins the race. And what I like about it is he also seriously debates blowing her off. Like,
that's funny.
He thinks he would be so different, and it turns out, no, they're all young and stupid and don't know what they're doing. And over the course of the day...
So it's Mr. Destiny.
A little bit. Over the course of the day, he keeps failing her in some way, and she keeps getting dragged off by her mom, and he keeps wishing to change his reality so that he was the better version of himself. What I like about the movie is that ultimately the movie says, hey, all of these wishes, that's it's not real. You're just like sort of resorting to this fantasy in which you're a better person than you think you are.
Yeah.
Or a better person than you actually are. And he has to come to terms with that. He has to come to terms with, no, you fucked up. You were rude, you failed, you didn't stand up to an adult when you should have. Like, there's all of these things you could have done. You didn't do them. It's nice to think this way, but it's not real. I appreciate that. There's a thoughtfulness to it. That said, it's kind of languid, and it's kind of feels like it's making a mountain out of a molehill story-wise. There really isn't a lot at stake, and it feels very... almost too peaceful for its own good. There's just too little going on.
It sounds like the premise of Mr. Destiny with, who is it, Richard Curtis, who does those like super sentimental love
Oh, you're thinking of About Time with Donald Gleason.
Yeah.
Which is a great movie. I like that movie a lot. That movie gets me. It's a real tearjerker. The movie I think of is...
It's going to jerk tears out with a fish hook.
Oh, but it does it, though.
That thing is aggressively sentimental.
There's an anime movie I think of actually called The Girl Who Leapt Through Time, which is a girl who realizes that she can just travel back through time just by jumping.
Okay.
And so she just jumps off a building or something like that, and boom, she wakes up in bed. It's like, I'm going to get today right. I'm going to get all the answers on that test correct. But she does that constantly. And she realizes that she's not actually making anything better. She's actually making a lot of things just worse, and she's never really facing the future in any... She's not dealing with any consequences. She's constantly micromanaging every decision she makes. Now, that one is a really thoughtful, really energetic tearjerker, and it all takes place at a high school, but it feels like more is at stake. It feels more of a coming-of-age story rather than the story of a sleepy summer afternoon.
Oh, okay.
So if the idea of fireworks intrigues you, it's okay, but I would much rather you see or seek out The Girl Who Leapt Through Time, directed by Mamoru Hosoda. There's a live-action version, which I haven't seen. The anime version is amazing, one of my favorite time travel movies. So I would recommend that instead.
Okay.
All right, now tell me about, and I did not see this, and it hurts me. I missed the screening because there was another screening I had to go to, and then it opened way across town. I didn't have a chance to go to it before we recorded. Tell me about Sorry to Bother You.
Sorry to Bother You is opening, it's only in New York and LA, or maybe some other cities.
And it's only one theater.
And it's in one
Los
theater
Angeles.
in all of Los Angeles, which is rare even for, but this is getting a lot of acclaim. It's also the best movie I've seen this year, and I'd be surprised if I see many others that are better than this.
Wouldn't it be great if you did? What a great year!
Would it be great? And there's another film opening next week, which like almost matches it, just because we got a lot of really good ones right next to each other right now. But Sorry to Bother You is a film directed by Boots Riley, who has for many years been the frontman for the protest rap enclave The Coup. And this is his first film, and he's going to... he's not going to shy away from his kind of bonkers commentary. This film is kind of like Jonathan Swift, Repo Man. It's got a little bit of impish, naughty John Waters humor to it. Repo Man is the one I'm going to be hammering on the most, though, just because it has these weird science fiction elements. It takes place in kind of the near future. Lakeith Stanfield, who was the fellow who said "Get Out" in Get Out, plays a fellow named Cassius Green, who is broke. He can't afford rent on the garage he's staying in, even though his uncle, Terry Crews, is his landlord. He gets a job in a call center, and the call center is this horrific, putty-colored, fluorescent lights hell, where he has to cold call people and sell them product. The old pro sitting in the next cubicle over to him, played by Danny Glover, says, well, you can only get success in this business if you, young black man, use your white voice. You have to sound like a white guy. People don't want to talk to a black guy who just sort of cold calls them on the phone, but they will talk to a white guy. So he uses his white voice. His white voice is played by David Cross. And not only is he successful, he is phenomenally successful. The success goes to his head in this call center. The higher-ups keep talking about how he's going to be sort of this prime caller. He's going to be promoted at some point, and there's this mythic elevator that you get on, and it takes you up to the top of the 60-story building where you get to take part in this really secretive enclave of super callers, which, of course, he'll eventually get up there. And what are they selling up there? But essentially...
Do we want to know? Is this a spoiler?
This isn't really a spoiler, because this is a...
Just tell us it's amazing.
It's amazing.
Okay.
They're selling something that is not at all ethical or legal. I'll say that.
Okay.
And meanwhile, he's dating Tessa Thompson, who is kind of the Boots Riley stand-in. She is a political performance artist who is protesting the injustice in the world and the way the workers are being exploited through art. And she's the only one who's really sort of resolute and sees what's going on, whereas the Cassius character is blinded by greed.
Yeah.
Armie Hammer plays the head of all of this company, and he's this sort of golden boy who just sort of gets to have rich white person orgies. All of these things I'm describing don't really get at the heart of the energy and the bizarreness of Sorry to Bother You. It is filmed like Spike Lee on steroids. Like, everything is just colorful and loud. The reality is just kind of bent in this world. There's a scene where when Cassius becomes more successful, that he dreams of himself moving into a new apartment, and using practical effects, the apartment's sort of his dumpy apartment unfolds and opens up and expands around him in this really great bit of special effects and set design. There's a lot of definite racial and political underpinnings that are going on about how a mainly black workforce is exploited by white people, and how, just like in the First Purge, the working classes are being put in this institution where they're designed to be essentially ground up and spit out. I wish I could tell you. I'll tell you maybe after you see it. We can maybe have a greater discussion as to
I don't want to ruin
some big reveals that happen near the end.
This isn't a movie that everyone in America got to see this week.
Yeah,
we don't want to ruin anything for you here, especially considering you love this.
I loved this movie.
Okay.
This is the type of movie that I think critics kind of wait for.
It's a movie, I'm sorry, I'm going to say this right now. The trailer alone, I saw the trailer for the first time in a big packed audience in a movie theater. People went apeshit. Usually people don't go apeshit over a trailer unless they know the property.
Right.
Like, oh my
Star
God, the
Wars
new Star Wars looks amazing. It's like people had no idea what this movie is. By the end of the trailer, everyone was saying, holy shit, that looks good. Like, everyone was reeling and clapping at the trailer. Like,
in the trailer,
really
we have Lakeith Stanfield using his David Cross voice, saying, "Well, I'm sure glad I have all of this money." And then there's this bizarre scene where Armie Hammer is like, "I have an offer for you. Here's $100 million." Like, you work in a call center. What the hell is going on in this movie? It feels natural.
Yeah.
Where you get from this guy living in Terry Crews' garage to Armie Hammer screaming, "I'll give you $100 million."
Well, I'm going to see this, hopefully by the time the next episode comes out, it expands wide next week.
Yeah,
Maybe we can have a longer conversation about it.
But
clearly you just want everyone to see this.
I demand that people see this movie. It's really, really kind of a new kind of movie. It's a new kind of voice. We as critics are always on the lookout for a new filmmaker or a new voice or a new talent or a new actor, a new director to sort of parlay onto the world, something that we can sort of not necessarily discover, but be there on the ground floor for when they enter the scene. And I feel like Boots Riley, if this is the only film he ever makes, he's already made a mark. And maybe he has this pretty glorious career as a filmmaker ahead of him. He's still pretty young. He's only about our age.
Okay.
I think he's a little older. But he's been doing these very politically confrontational pieces of music and his hip-hop for a long time. Now he's moved that sort of rebellious spirit into the world of cinema, and it feels like he's breaking a lot of rules. And it feels like he's inventing something kind of new. And I don't think you'll ever see a film kind of like this.
I feel like film critics should get, and I think you get like a maximum of like 2 a year.
Uh-huh.
I think film critics should get to like a card you get to play, like a get out of jail free card. And the card is just, trust me, go see it. Like, I do this for a living, trust me. Like, there should be some kind of card you can play where just like, if you, I know you're going to go see Ant-Man, I know you're going to go see the First Purge, all that kind of stuff. This independent movie will blow you away and you will thank me for it. Go see blank. Sorry to bother you, for example.
Yeah.
I would have used it for You Were Never Really Here.
There you go.
Like, there's just like this, even if you don't love it, it will make an impact.
Yeah, I got one for coming out next week as well.
Okay, we only get 2 a year.
I'm going to use both of my cards on one day. But,
Ooh, such a bold, bold
I know,
choice.
I'm such a maverick.
you renegade. On the critically acclaimed scale, we rate movies from C- to C+. C- is don't go see it. C+ is do go see it. C is maybe? Sorry to bother you.
Sorry to bother you. I mean, that's a C+.
Okay.
This,
we have to be
like
thorough.
I said, it's going to be tough if I mean, this is the best film I've seen this year. If it ends up not at my number one, I'll be a little bit surprised. Maybe I'll cool on it. Maybe I'll rethink it. But it's going to be difficult to beat something this striking, this original, and this thoughtful and this strange.
That's how I felt last year about Get Out. I was just like, man, if there's a better movie than this, it's going to be a great year. Turns out there wasn't. Still a good year, though. Okay, Fireworks. A C, middle, straight down the middle. Some good ideas, some lovely animation, but I've seen the material done a little better in other similar works, and ultimately it doesn't quite stack up. The Legacy of a Whitetail Deer Hunter, C-. It's not a passionate C-. It's not terrible. It just doesn't really have much to contribute. You're not really going to get much out of it other than another pretty good Josh Brolin performance. Like, he'd never be nominated for anything for it, but he's good in it.
Yeah.
The First Purge.
First Purge, C. It doesn't have the teeth that I think it could have had. Watchable. I like the mayhem, and I still like the idea behind the Purge. I like how forthright these movies are.
I'm going to give it a low C+. I appreciate just how confrontational it is. Its timeliness is certainly working in its favor. It's not the best Purge movie because it doesn't balance the entertainment value with the political allegory, but man, the political allegory is on fucking point. Like, it's gonna feel really super relevant, and I don't think we can deny that.
Yeah.
And then lastly, Ant-Man and the Wasp.
A C.
Okay.
It's fine. Like I said before, it's fine.
It's a high C for me. Like, it's, if you can skip this one if you are like really like, I don't have the money. You don't need to see this one in a theater. It's fun though, and you probably have a good time if you did.
Yeah.
So let's move on. Our big double feature this week. We realized we hadn't done a lot of slasher movies, and one of the reasons why is because a lot of slasher movies have
many sequels.
Have a lot of sequels. Now, there's a whole bunch that don't, but they're not talked about very often, and we wanted to explore some of those. And the film y'all picked on the Schmoville Facebook page was See No Evil, a WWE production starring Kane.
Back before those were common. I think this was only like the second or third WWE film.
And initially they were seen as kind of a joke, like, haha, WWE is going to make movies.
WWE was using their studio as a platform to turn a lot of their wrestlers into movie stars. And Rock the Dwayne Johnson notwithstanding, not a lot have been able to sort of make that transition. I think John Cena, was he a wrestler or no?
He was a wrestler.
Okay.
Okay, so initially, WWE, sometimes earlier on as WWE Films or WWF Entertainment, they did the first few big The Rock movies, The Scorpion King, The Rundown, Walking Tall. See No Evil was the first non-The Rock movie that they did. Yeah,
it's 2006, 5 or 6?
2006. And later in 2006, they released The Marine, starring John Cena. I might be pronouncing that wrong. John Cena?
Cena.
We got it right somewhere.
I've been saying Senna, and I'm pretty sure that's incorrect.
It was followed by The Condemned, which was this sort of Battle Royale knockoff starring Steve Austin. They did the sequel to Behind Enemy Lines starring Mr. Kennedy. They did a Die Hard 3 knockoff called 12 Rounds, which was actually not bad.
I didn't see the first 12 rounds, but I did see the straight-to-video 12 Rounds 2, which I think was the one with Triple H.
Yeah.
I got to interview Triple H about that one.
That's cool. The first 12 rounds is okay.
Yeah.
The Condemned is okay. Let's see what we got here. Legendary, which is not a very good sort of coming-of-age high school wrestling movie. Knucklehead, which I didn't see. The Chaperone, I didn't see.
Here was my thought. Now, this is made by WWE. These wrestlers are under contract. And my guess is either the manager or the studio or the wrestler themselves said, hey, let's do feature films, and we need to essentially find an on-screen equivalent for their ring personality.
Often, but not necessarily. There's some where it's just they just find a role.
Yeah.
Like, for example, there's actually like a really good coming-of-age drama they did called That's What I Am, which co-stars Randy Orton. But he's like the fifth lead. Like, he's not even in it that much.
Okay.
Like, he's just like someone's dad. Like, that's not necessarily the case. Sometimes they just make a damn movie.
I'm sort of shocked that WWE Entertainment has not... Well, entertainment. WWE has not gone the route of El Santo, where they just have the wrestlers playing themselves and they're fighting like Dracula or something.
Then you haven't heard of Scooby-Doo and WWE Curse of the Speed Demon. They're doing it in animation form.
Okay, well, maybe the animated films.
The Jetsons in WWE Robo WrestleMania.
They kind of did with the Scorpion King. We're going to put The Rock in a movie. What is he? Well, he's a giant scorpion monster.
Scooby-Doo WrestleMania Mystery.
And he fights mummies. Okay, I'm with you, the Scorpion King.
Yeah. That movie's fine. I like that movie.
But
it's stupid, but it's fun.
With that in mind, these wrestlers are sort of choosing their on-screen personas. What is it about Kane that he would want to select, perhaps for himself, the role of a hulking, murderous simpleton who lives in a filth hovel?
And likes to gouge out eyes.
And likes to gouge out eyes with his fingers and keep them in a jar.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to say right now, in case you haven't noticed from the first few minutes of this conversation, neither Whitney and I are wrestling guys.
We're not wrestling guys.
We couldn't tell you the history of Kane if you put a gun to our head. We just don't know it.
I was from 1987 until partway through 1988, and that's kind of it.
I was briefly, mildly interested in like Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant, and then I left. Like, that's it. I was done.
I did get to see Andre the Giant wrestle Jake the Snake Roberts live.
Wow, that's pretty cool, actually.
So
I know enough to know that's cool.
When I was a kid, I got to do that. That's as far as it took.
So we don't know Kane's persona, but we do know is that they decided that when Kane was going to star in a movie, they decided to make him threatening. Now, there is a history, I know this, of threatening wrestlers. Like scary wrestlers, The Undertaker, like wrestlers like, run, it's Kane! Kane is here! And I think that's what we're playing off of, is just how giant and threatening he is. See No Evil, you pretty much nailed it right there. It's not a complicated movie. Kane stars as Jacob Goodnight, a name they actually managed to not actually say over the course of the movie. They cut out, apparently, the scene where they actually said what his name was. It never comes up. So that's fun. He stars as a serial killer. At the beginning of the movie, he is shot in the head by cops who prevent him from hurting another young woman.
Who's already had her eyes removed.
It's really gross. And he's presumably dead. And then years later, one of the cops who lost an arm in an altercation with Jacob Goodnight is now working as a security guard.
It's for a prison release work program.
Well, it's like a juvenile hall work program. They're like teenagers.
Are they? Because they look like adults to me. But
I think they're supposed to be teenagers. Or at the very least, it's not like hardcore prison. The implication is, here are some wayward kids. They're all pretty young. Most of them are in for like drugs. That's it. Like nothing like horrifying.
Well,
I killed many people.
One guy was like
a
protester or something. Like he's cutting the heads off.
One guy was a hacker. Like, it's not like
They're not violent criminals.
Yeah. And they're all being bussed to this ancient hotel, which has had a huge fire, never really been repaired.
And,
it looks like
it looks like a movie set, doesn't it?
It looks like someone spilled bong water on everything a year ago and never cleaned up.
It is one of the more disgusting just this whole movie is one of the most disgusting movies just looking that I've seen in a while.
Don't wear white to the set. You will not it's not worth it. Wear black. It'll just get stronger.
This was the mid 2000s, and I feel like horror was going through a dark phase still at this point, where
everything was really darkly shot.
Everything was really darkly
this
shot.
This was filmed by Gregory Dark.
That's
his director's name.
It stars
from the director of New Wave Hookers. He actually got his start in porn. I love it when that happens.
New Wave Hookers is pretty amazing. But just everything was in the wake of like Saw. Everything was really sort of torture and blood and guts, and there was this really kind of fetishistic approach to human viscera in this phase in horror. There were a lot of really hard R-rated horror
This was the
movies.
Platinum Dunes era. They're still around, but like they were really like, we're gonna do a Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake, and it's gonna have even more despair.
Yeah,
how? Like even Tobe Hooper took out the despair. Like even he reined it in after a while.
Like it's not as disgusting, yet somehow it's more disgusting. So everything is like the blood is all extra sticky and it all has like hair and dirt in it, and there's flies and roaches and bruises and people spitting teeth. The camera will cut to slow motion just so we can see like pieces of a person's body being pulled apart in excruciating detail. It was a very
violent era.
It's an anatomical. I mean, gore has always been a part of this, gore and blood, but.
And for the record, there were some really good movies made during this era within that framework. This isn't one of them.
No, well, and the point is, certain filmmakers were getting at sort of the despair and the fear and the death of it, and others were just getting really kind of high and excited by the flying guts.
Well, I've said this before. When something is popular, there's come a lot of imitators. And the least of the imitators will only focus on the things that are easiest to replicate, which is the gore, the griminess, the sort of amorality of it. That's the easy stuff. Putting something else in there is hard.
Sadly, there's not much else in here. There's some like religious hysteria, but it's just like haphazardly spackled on the top.
It's just an excuse.
Yeah.
So these kids are bussed into like this hotel, and the idea is they're going to spend the weekend
and they're all
cleaning up.
And they're all very, very good looking.
Oh yeah,
they're like really well cleaned up. They have nice hair. The women all have beautiful makeup. They all have, like they're nice. They're not in prison clothes at all. They have their nice outfits.
They do that thing that all attractive people have been trained to do. Like whenever they like take a shower, they pose. Like that's like a class you take in school.
Arch their back and throw their head back, and the guys rub water on their chests. I've never done that in the shower. I don't just rub water on my chest.
Yeah,
I tried it once and it just felt silly. It's like I saw that in a movie once. What would happen if I just rubbing my chest? Okay, I'm gonna wash now.
Yeah, no one's looking because it's like they're aware that they're being filmed. Like that's it, and that's
and there's no shower curtain as well.
And to be fair, that is something we go to a slasher movie for, is this certain level of decadence and prurience.
The titillation goes hand in glove with the genre.
One of the things that people expect from the slasher genre is sinful kids being punished, and that goes pretty much back to Black Christmas and Halloween. Neither of the films were actually about that. That was kind of incidental.
Something people noticed and they kept repeating in the ripoffs, and it kind of became a theme of the entire genre.
It was kind of an accidental theme. Yeah. And like the whole thing is all these young people who were getting killed in Halloween movies, they were just young people. Even Laurie Strode, everyone always points to Laurie Strode in Halloween as though she's like, oh, she was the perfect virgin or whatever. She smokes pot in that movie. She talks about how she wants to have sex. She's just busy that night. Like she's just taking her job seriously. That's it. It's not
the point is she's not as cool as her friends. She got stuck babysitting, whereas their friends were busy, canoodling in empty homes.
Yeah, and they were distracted. That's it. They were distracted. That's it. That's the whole thing.
Have you ever noticed they never explain where any of the adults are, that their kids are being babysat? I understand it's Halloween and they're probably at a party somewhere, but they never say that. We never meet those characters.
It's just not important at all. But you're right, actually. I never thought about that before. It's a good point. So Jacob Goodnight, we find out that he was raised by a dangerously mentally ill woman who kept him in a cage and showed him pornography as a child and said, it's bad, look at their eyes, kill their eyes, kill them. And Jacob Goodnight's like, well, all right, that's the way it goes.
I see your filthy mind, filthy, and it's all based on sort of the premise: the eyes are the window of the soul. The soul's tainted. You're about the eyes. Okay,
so Jacob Goodnight kills all of these horny teenagers and pokes out their eyes. That's it.
They wanted the poke out the eyes part. And they had to sort of reverse engineer that. So.
They did. That was their gimmick. He also has a chain with a giant hook on it that he's very good with. He can chuck that chain like across a hallway like Scorpion. It's like come here!
It's like the chains in Hellraiser, but he's just throwing it.
Yeah. I will say this. Not that Kane is given much to work with here, but he is an intimidating presence. Like, as a slasher villain, like, he's not bad. He's doing the job.
Well, you look at someone like Jason Voorhees, you just get a big, huge stunt guy, and he's going to be intimidating. You put him in the mask, you put him in, gigantic boots. He's just a big, scary presence. Kane is a wrestler. He's like, what, 7'40"? He's a gigantic guy. He's a gigantic guy, he's 300 pounds of muscle, and he's bald, and he also has like sort of a...
Well, he has a bullet hole in his head. They never explain how he's alive, by the way. He's got a bullet hole in his head that's still open.
He has a heavy brow. He's a fellow with a heavy brow, which makes him look a little bit more intimidating. I'm sure he's just a gentle, ordinary man, but
by all accounts, I've heard
you spray him down with grimy sweat, and you put a big metal hook in his hand, and you have him go murder you. It's kind of scary.
Yeah.
So yeah. Sadly, he doesn't go, murder you. He doesn't speak, but...
He speaks a little bit. Like, he has a couple of lines. Not really, though. Like, he doesn't speak much.
He's got a bullet hole in his head, which gets ripped open at some point in the course of the movie.
And then bugs crawl out of it.
Yeah, like he said, like maggots living in his brain this whole time.
They kind of addressed that in the sequel, which I do want to talk about, because I've seen the sequel, and the sequel's actually not bad. The sequel's actually kind of fun. Like, I'll talk about the sequel in a minute.
See even less evil.
It's seen no evil, too. It's not complicated. So, yeah, the kids run around. Some of them are trying to find hidden treasure in the hotel. That's the right noise.
Because we're in freaking Scooby-Doo all of a sudden.
The survivor girl, as they are known, or the final girl. Final girl, she survives because she has religious tattoos, and he's like, well, I guess she's fine. Touche.
Look, Ghost of Mother, she's okay. She's a Christian.
Yeah. The one sort of noteworthy thing is that the security guard, who it turns out is like the whole motivation for everything, he was brought to the hotel for vengeance purposes. The kids are just bonus. He dies right away. Like, to the film's credit, that's like the one surprise the film has. Like, oh shit, I thought he was going to stick around a little longer.
I thought it was going to be the killer and the cop against each other again.
Yeah, nope.
He just dies.
There's a couple of sort of memorable deaths. There's like a couple, like there's a hanging out of a window kill that goes on like too long. And it's kind of funny. But yeah, it is gory as hell. If that's all you're into, I did appreciate the dog reversal. Because there's a bit at the beginning where before all the kids know that there's a killer and they're just having their dinner out in like this atrium, and there's a stray dog, and there's this young woman who's like feeding the dog, and the other guy's like, hey, it's a stray dog, get it out of here, it's dangerous, it's bad, I hate dogs, throw a thing. And she's just like, don't be mean, it's a dog. And she is later killed by a pack of wild dogs, including that dog. Like, I was like, okay, again, that's cynical, but I didn't.
This was
dark.
This was the mid 2000s. Nihilism was just sort of hip at the time, thanks to like Saw. Just, you are going to be punished. That's what horror is in the mid 2000s in America. We don't know what sort of punishment awaits us. All we know is it's going to be swift, painful, and undeserved.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people, when we announced that we were, I'm sorry, you.
Oh well, I was just going to say that that sort of nihilism has a point if you know that's what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And I actually really dig certain films that kind of play really deeply into that nihilism. Lars von Trier, but
sure.
It's when the slasher films get a hold of that nihilism and try to treat it as if it's something that's kind of cool that it becomes unbelievably insufferable. And that's kind of the worst element of See No Evil.
The thing with the slasher movie is that if you don't, there's two kinds of slasher movies. Slasher movies where you give a shit about the people being killed, and slasher movies where you don't. Mm-hmm. The difference is how much the filmmakers care about them. It frequently is. And if you care about the characters, it's going to be more suspenseful. It's going to feel more real. I find a lot of the best slasher movies feel like we actually saw someone's life get suddenly and unexpectedly interrupted by something horrific. Yeah. And a lot of the worst slashers, like this one, just feels like this sort of exercise in inevitability. And they can be entertaining.
Super fatalistic.
Yeah, and that can be entertaining in its way, but it doesn't really go anywhere beyond that. But you're right. There is this sort of dime store...
adolescent nihilism.
Yeah, this adolescent nihilism, this idea that we know how the world works, the world is really, really dark and fucked up, which is a perspective a lot of people have, but a lot of people also grow out of it.
Yeah.
And I would like...
Which is why I call it adolescent. It's something
exactly.
that you sort of work your way through.
And I know that some people actually like this movie, and I can kind of see why. If it came along at the right time, if you were like 18 and you hadn't seen a ton of slashers, there's a functionality to See No Evil that you might get into. It was the style at the time. You were used to this sort of visual dynamic. You might be a big fan of wrestling and Kane in particular. I totally get that. On the surface, it hits a lot of the beats of what we expect from a slasher movie.
But just on the surface.
But just on the surface. Slasher movies kind of died again in the 21st century. There's a few, but there was this big resurgence in the late 90s, and they're just not popular right now. And there'll come a time when they probably come back, but right now, not many.
Maybe.
Honestly. So I think any new one feels kind of pleasant if you're a fan of the genre.
I think the slasher is played out. I think the genre is officially dead. And, they'll make more, but they'll be retro at this point. Scream was kind of like the only way we could have done it, like continued it on. It's like, well, we've seen so many slasher movies, we'll just put populate our slasher movie with people who have seen slasher movies, because that's all we can really do with the genre anymore. We have to comment on how trite all of this is.
Yeah, you can't have a slasher today without people realizing this is like a slasher
comment movie. On the really overfamiliar banality of the genre.
Scream has aged really well. Yeah. Like, obviously many of the elements they're watching VHS tapes, but like...
It defines the decade of the 90s in an exemplary fashion.
But many of the issues that Scream raised about, and without telling, because we're not talking about Scream right now, I don't want to get into spoiler territory in case you haven't seen it. You should. It's great. And once you realize like who the killer is, and you find out like why they're doing what they're doing, you realize, oh, this theme is unfortunately still very topical. Yeah. And kind of, it's one of everyone talks about how meta the Scream movies are. They're actually about a lot more than that, and that's still really super relevant. And
which is why I do not begrudge Scream 4. I know a lot of people didn't like that one. I think it's just fine. Actually.
I think there are things that movie does wrong, but it's still pretty good.
Yeah.
And I still dig it. But yeah, See No Evil is at best... It's a middle-of-the-road, ultra-dark slasher movie. At worst, it just makes no impression.
If you want blood, this has got a lot of gross, bloody parts to it. The teenager characters, I guess they're teenagers, are, all, as in slasher movie tradition, incredibly horny. They all just want to get laid. And I can think of no less sexy place to have sex than in that horrific hotel.
Oh, well, then you haven't seen
like,
See No Evil 2.
Because they're like rolling around on the floor, and there's like rusty nails and roach corpses on the ground, and they're just sort of rolling their bare backs onto their crunchy roach backs, and it's just... They started making out, and I was like, oh no, nah. I'd say have sex in the shower, but it just spews out grease at this point. Yeah, it's yuck. Oh, no.
We're not going to talk too much about it because I don't even think you saw it, but 8 years later, there was a See No Evil 2.
No, I did not see See No Evil 2.
And I want to give See No Evil 2 credit for being a pretty darn good slasher movie. Part of it was directed by the Shoshka sisters, Jen and Sylvia.
Nice. Okay.
They did American Mary, which is one of my favorite horror movies of the decade.
Nice.
So far, most of the other movies that they made are good, have some really cool ideas in them, but aren't great. See No Evil 2 is Jacob Goodnight. His corpse is brought into a mortuary, or a morgue.
Okay.
And the lab assistants who are there are left in there overnight. One of them is it's their birthday that day, and so a bunch of their friends come in with like booze.
Okay.
And when they find out that Jacob Goodnight is there, one of them, who's played by Catherine Isabel from the Ginger Snaps movies, is a huge serial killer nut.
Oh dear.
So she thinks that's awesome, and there's this whole bit where she's just like kind of like making out with the corpse, and it's like really fucking crazy. And then Jacob Goodnight just wakes up, and apparently Jacob Goodnight is a supernatural killer a la later Jason Voorhees, which explains why he survived that gunshot to the head. Like there actually is like otherwise there's no reason for him to be alive in See No Evil 1.
In a post-credit stinger of See No Evil, like first of all he gets impaled through the eye. Poetic justice.
Falls off a window.
I'm giving you the ending because this isn't a surprise. He falls off the building. Like the pole catches on the roof and his body gets jarred about. And
that was pretty cool. When it hits the roof, that was like, that's a detail. They added that. That was kind of neat.
I mean, it's a useless bit of extra violence, but all right. And then his head, which now has a huge hole in it, lands on, hard on a wooden floor. We cut to the post-credit sequence. His body is still laying there on the floor, big gaping ocular cavity, and the dog we saw earlier comes by and pees in it. Cut to black. That's the kind of movie we're dealing with here.
Yeah, the sequel is classier.
Okay.
The sequel is classier. The sequel
and it has necrophilia.
It has a hint of necrophilia. Well, that's the Shoshka sisters for you. And if you look at American Mary, they're really interested in sort of outre kink and the types of characters. Some of them good people, some of them not, who are interested in that sort of outsider mentality, be it sexual or through body modification, or it's sort of like. Nowadays, a lot of the people who were living on the fringes of society back at the dawn of like the slasher genre are kind of at the forefront of society. And it's not that weird. So they're interested in people who are currently at the fringe.
Okay.
And when they focus on that, their movies are really interesting. And then when they do just like, a generic action movie set in a prison, it's okay. But it doesn't seem to have as much of their creativity involved. See No Evil 2 is a well-made, kind of straightforward slasher movie. If it had come out in the 80s, it would be very well remembered. It would be like, oh yeah, that was a good one. It's not up there with the classics, but there's a hell of a lot worse. Like, so if you liked See No Evil 1 and you never saw the sequel, it's pretty good. And so I just want to give a bit of a shout out because I like that one.
All right.
All right. So for our double feature, we had a lot of guesses on the Schmogle Facebook page.
And you and I also debated a bit.
We had.
As we've said before, some of these movies are so bad and there's like nothing in them that it's kind of hard to find something to hang our hat on in terms of like what we can match to it.
So when we wanted to come up with a great movie, we knew it was probably going to be a horror movie. And here we go. Here's what a lot of you at the Schmoville !Facebook page thought we were going to pick. One of the suggestions was Suspiria. I get what you're going for with like the creepy building and everything like that, but there's way more going on. It's its own entity. Silent Hill, I'm not that much of a fan.
I think Silent Hill is not that good.
It's well shot.
Silent Hill, what is it? Retribution was the title?
Revelations. Was the second one. The sequel is abysmal.
The sequel is so very bad.
We had Texas Chainsaw Massacre. No word if it was the original or the remake. Either one would have been fine.
The remake matches this one, but again, I'm not a fan of the remake. I'm one of the few, but I know a lot of people really like that movie.
See No Evil, Hear No Evil.
That's cute. Aren't you
Winky
cute?
face. Let's see what we got here. Halloween. Yeah, the prototypical slasher movie. That makes perfect sense.
Too obvious. We didn't want to go that far.
One of those black and white Mexican wrestling movies starring the always masked Santo. That would have been great, actually, and I kind of wish we'd thought of that, and I kind of wish I was enough of an expert in the Santo or Blue Demon movies to know which one's like considered the great one.
Oh, well, it's Santo y Blue Demon contra los monstruos.
Okay, that's the one where he fights Dracula and the Wolfman.
And all of them.
Okay,
all
I've
of
actually
the
seen that
monsters.
one.
Okay, yeah.
I guess I've seen that.
That's considered sort of, I think, the pinnacle in terms of luchador films.
Yeah, I'm very fascinated in luchador movies, but I don't have the expertise in them, and one of these days I really do want to sit down.
I've only seen... I saw them a lot as a kid. For some reason, they played those luchador films on public television a lot. Yeah.
Let's see what we got here. Session 9. That one actually makes a lot of sense.
That was a good idea.
Because that's another one about a bunch of people going to an isolated, creepy place in order to clean it up and then horror attacking. That's one of the better haunted house movies of like the last 20 years. So that's a really, really good pick. Let's see what we got here. They Live, because of the whole horror film starring a wrestler connection. I get it. It's a little thin for our purposes, but I love They Live.
There's way too much going on in They Live. We'll get to They Live eventually.
Paulo Yama suggested Mario Bava's A Bay of Blood, which that's a good thought. I wish we'd thought of that, actually, kind of, because that's kind of, aside from Psycho and Peeping Tom, that's like one of the other films that kind of created the idea of the slasher movie, and people don't talk about that one as much. So I think at some point down the line we might have to delve into Bay of Blood.
But yeah, for sure.
Let's see what we got here. Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. God, that movie's good. It's dire, but it's really good. It's
really hard to... I only watched that for the first time kind of recently, and yeah, it's really, really harrowing.
All right, let's see what we got here. And then we'll just go to the correct answer. Julia Artemis Pinkham predicted Don't Breathe. And you were right. It was between Don't Breathe and People Under the Stairs, both of which were kind of claustrophobic, people trapped in a house with a murderer, economic anxiety movies. The only reason we went with Don't Breathe is because we kind of recently talked about a Wes Craven movie, and we didn't want it to seem like the Wes Craven show. But that movie was great, too. But yeah.
I actually rewatched The People Under the Stairs in preparation before we were still on the fence, so I wanted to because it had been a while since I'd seen The People Under the Stairs. It's good.
I think it's his unsung masterpiece. People talk about The Hills Have Eyes, Nightmare Before Christmas, Nightmare on Elm Street, even Last House on the Left. We already talked about Scream recently, but yeah, People Under the Stairs is the other truly unassailably brilliant movie I think he did.
Yeah. It's a little chaotic. Like, it just sort of throws you right into the action. It doesn't have a lot of like rising tension. It's just, crazy crap is happening, and it's gonna keep on happening. But it's very much about economic anxiety. It's
and racism and religious very extremism.
Much, racism, and all of the things you see in The Purge.
Yeah, and a couple of things you see in See No Evil. So, Julie, before we get going, Julia, everything you do is amazing.
Well done, man.
You are better than everyone else in the universe right now. The moment will not last for long. Eventually, it'll have to be someone else. I don't want this to go to your head, but for now, enjoy this moment.
You will be ripped from your throne.
Yeah, that I want you to just feel waves of good vibes from everyone around you, because you are the most incredible human being.
Hold your queenly scepter with pride.
Are you okay? You have good words today? What's going on?
I've had a lot of caffeine, so my lips are saying every word at once at this point.
Moving on. So the movie we picked is Don't Breathe from 2016, directed by Fede Alvarez, whose previous film before this was the quite good remake of The Evil Dead.
Yeah, well...
It's like, maybe it's not as good as the original, but it's still good.
In terms of it being like a movie, they did insert some interesting things into it about... how unsure the possessed girl's friends were that she was she possessed by a demon, or was she relapsing from drugs, which was the reason they were going to that cabin in the woods.
That was an interesting wrinkle.
And that's an interesting wrinkle. But then it goes way over the edge, like pretty early on. The gore, as I've said before, the gore in that movie is fucking spectacular. Like, and not in the see no evil way where it's just kind of gross.
It's like, it's inventive, and it's what I love about the remake of Evil Dead is a lot of people remake a movie. The Evil Dead remake sort of remade the style of the movie. You look at the original Evil Dead movies, the first two in particular, Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn. They're made with this sort of whirligig, Looney Tunes, visual mania.
They're paced like comedies.
Oh, absolutely. They're paced like insane comedies. Yeah. They pace like Marx Brothers comedies.
Yeah.
And that's a certain type of visual style that is hard to replicate because it takes a lot of effort, so most people don't bother.
And most people aren't Sam Raimi, and even Sam Raimi doesn't do it anymore.
Yeah, so. not to that degree. So, like, Sam Raimi hasn't made a movie in years. Like, I don't even know if he's still working. But like,
Oz the last one he made?
I think so. Yeah. Like, it's hard to capture that energy. And Fede Alvarez, to his credit, captured that energy, brought a little bit of himself to it, but then afterwards people were like, okay, that was cool. Does he have something of his own in him? Like, is this going to be another, like, Alien Ant Farm where, like, their only hit is a cover? Like, or do they have, like, a good album in them somewhere?
Well, in the terms of Alien Ant Farm did not have a good record.
Exactly. So was Fede Alvarez the new Alien Ant Farm? And then he came out with an original motion picture, co-written by Fede Alvarez, called Don't Breathe, which owes a lot to previous films, including The People Under the Stairs, Wait Until Dark, for example. And yet it feels like its own thing. It is one of the most intense thrillers of the decade.
It's really inventive, and it's based on a really interesting idea. And you and I, who have been following horror just sort of overall, have noticed, and a lot of critics have noticed, that the last maybe 6 to 8 years of horror have been really, really great.
There's
been an explosion in a lot of really thoughtful, really creative, inventive indie horror films to come from a new vanguard. Like, this new generation is coming up. People like Adam Wingard and Alex Garland, I guess, could be folded in there as well. James Wan.
Yeah. The Shoshka Sisters.
Yeah, this new generation of filmmakers that is sort of breaking in and doing really interesting things, like, you know, It Follows, The Babadook comes out. These are all really fascinating, textured, novel horror movies that are more than tapping into just sort of the mainstream PG-13 haunting trends. These are trying not to do anything trendy. And I feel like Don't Breathe kind of can also be folded into that mix.
Absolutely. It's the story of a group of teenagers who are, I think it's in Detroit.
It's in Detroit. It's in destitute, economically destroyed Detroit.
Yeah, and they all feel like they have no future for one reason or another, and so they have taken to one of the characters played by Dylan Minette, who was also in Goosebumps, with a movie I quite like. His father works for a security firm, and so he has access to a whole lot of keys. He has access to keys, he has access to security codes, and they have been breaking into people's places and stealing their stuff. Why? Because times are hard.
To make ends meet.
And they realize that because they don't want to steal so much that it becomes a felony and they'll go to jail for the rest of their lives. So they've been keeping it pretty small. Problem is, that means they're not getting out of their station.
No, they're just paying bills.
So after an initial early low-intensity heist, they catch wind of an old blind war veteran whose daughter had been killed in a hit-and-run accident, and he made, like, hundreds of thousands of dollars in a settlement.
Yeah.
And that money is probably still at his house. What's more, his house is the last populated house in a destitute neighborhood. So he's all alone out there. It's easy pickings.
Or is it?
Yeah, because as we've all know from seeing movies, that always goes well. So they decide
as it turns out, this blind old war veteran isn't a helpless old man.
Not at all. He's played by Stephen Lang from Avatar, and he's threatening as fuck. So they break into the house, and
he's got like old man guns.
Yeah, they break into the house, and at first they put off like a sort of a homemade like bomb, like gas bomb in his bedroom, thinking it'll knock him out, but he's just so muscly it didn't work. So while they're like sneaking around trying to find the money, he just pops up, and again, he's blind. He's not seeing them. They're right in front of him. And one of them speaks up. He doesn't know the other two are there. He gets in a fight with that guy and shoots that guy in the head. And so everyone else is like freaking out, trying not to make a fucking sound. Well, this guy just takes a moment, Then he starts getting the plastic, starts getting the hacksaw, and you realize this guy's not calling the cops. He would call the cops if something fucking insane wasn't up.
He starts locking the doors. He realizes, oh, well, you're in here with me.
Yeah, he realizes...
I can't see you, but that's not going to stop me.
He knows the place better than they do. They start trying to run around, and it's super intense, and it's a really exciting and dynamic thing to do visually, because the characters' awareness of their surroundings are entirely separate. You're looking at people who can't see each other. There's even a scene where Stephen Lang turns off the lights, and very cleverly, instead of doing like stupid night vision, the screen goes white. Like the screen goes like, instead of black and white, it's white and black. And it creates that sort of oppressiveness of darkness, but completely inverted, and it's a really clever way to do it.
Good way to visualize being in complete darkness.
One of the things that this movie does that See No Evil never does, and I think it's because their set probably wasn't as well thought out, See No Evil, when they break into the house, shows you everything that's going to be important later. It shows you where every room is, where every important thing is, and it lingers on things you don't know are about to be fucked up. Like, it lingers on the tools, on like the tool rack with like a hammer and like a hacksaws on it. It's just like, and especially when you see it the first time, you're like, oh, this was all inevitable, wasn't it? Linger on that like window in the roof of the ceiling. Yeah, someone's gonna fall through that fucker. That's gonna be bad.
Batman their way through that thing.
And then it just keeps getting more and more intense. As how much do we reveal about where it goes?
Well, as it turns out, the old man. This is a recent film, so I don't think we should discuss the ending, and it's good enough a secret to keep. But the old man has, in addition to having all that money, does have an additional secret that it's an illegal secret. I'll say that
it's the reason why he didn't call the cops.
Yeah, and we have to, when that information is given to the audience, it's not that everything changes, but we do have a brand new dynamic that we have to deal with,
and it changes everything. And it's a sort of thing that it's interesting because a lot of people when this movie came out felt a little betrayed by the movie, because when we find out what Stephen Lang is really up to, it's gross, and it's gross in a way that the movie doesn't prepare you for.
Yeah,
it's kind of comes right at you from the middle.
Blindsides you a little bit.
And if you're not feeling it, if you're not like able to go down that road, it might be so uncomfortable you have to turn off the movie or leave the theater. That said, it's intense as fuck. And I think that one of the things I like about this movie, first off, again, it's shot insanely well. It's so fantastically presented and dynamic, and the editing is spot on throughout. Everything about it feels completely well thought out. The cast is fantastic. Stephen Lang is terrifying. I'm a huge fan of Jane Levy in particular. She was also in Evil Dead. She's going to be in Castle Rock on Hulu. She is becoming one of our more interesting and reliable scream queens. Just, superstars who end up in a lot of horror movies.
Yeah.
She's fantastic. And the movie gradually starts centering itself upon her. And what you realize as you're watching it is that this isn't a movie that's just like a closed room claustrophobic thriller like See No Evil. This is a movie that's about something, and it's pretty obvious at the beginning that it's about a sort of economic anxiety. But one of the things that Stephen Lang even gets to talk about a little bit when he talks about the hit and run accident that killed his daughter is that, rich people don't go to jail.
Yeah.
And what we realize over the course of the film is neither do men. Because the shift that the movie takes basically just says, we think about this as an economic power struggle. There are other power dynamics that are keeping these characters completely feeling helpless to the extent that they feel the need to break the law. To the extent where they feel the need to like, okay, well, we could call the cops in the sky and this could all be over. And then Jane Levy says, but then we can't keep the money. And that's not like an easy decision to make because they're so screwed anyway. That's really important and intense. And when you have a story about people who commit a sin and then get punished 40 million times over, which is what a lot of horror movies are about, you want to, if you don't sympathize with the sin, you want that person to die. You do.
Yeah.
That's the reason why a lot of the Jason Voorhees movies, you don't care who they die, because those were shitty characters. They're not very well written, or they're written to be so bad that you want them dispatched of because it's fiction and you don't believe in their existence anyway. And Don't Breathe, you believe in these characters. You believe in the existence of these characters, and even though they are varying degrees of criminal, unethical, or immoral, at least one or two of them are doing it for completely relatable reasons. So you do side with her in particular. And the movie evolves, I think, to actually become something very potent about that.
I think we can mention that a lot of what you were talking about, how men aren't punished, does connect to... I'm trying to say this as cautiously as I can.
It connects to what Stephen Lang's secret is.
It connects to what his secret is, and it connects to the fact that he has a dead daughter at the film's outset, that this is how he got his fortune. And a lot of it stems from, like, the Rocky character and his...
Rocky's played by Jane Levy.
The Jane Levy character, and his relationship to her, in that she is a young woman who is sort of like could serve as sort of like a visual daughter figure. They don't have that sort of relationship. He's an attacker.
Projecting. He sees either directly or indirectly women are his property.
Well, and
his daughter is a commodity who he exchanged for money, even though he's mad about it, and now he has other plans.
They're things to be they're fragile things to be protected. And
to serve a function.
And serve a function to him. So yeah, all of that comes back from this very kind of... the film is very underhanded and very, like, clever about the way they slip it in, about this misogyny that's been lurking in a lot of his ideas and his thoughts and the way he looks at the world. Yeah.
And as a result, it feels like a really great movie as opposed to merely an entertaining or scary movie. Again, See No Evil, all of that religious fervor, it doesn't connect to anything. It's not about that. None of the protagonists, none of the characters who die over the course of it have any meaningful connection to religion. Even the character who has religious tattoos.
They don't talk about faith or Christianity at all. It's just
their faith. It's not like they're like on some like religious retreat where like, you know, like, oh, the Catholic Church has set this thing up to save your souls. Even that would have tied it all in together. It's completely an afterthought. Here, everything about Don't Breathe feels very carefully calculated. And you can argue that it is gross or tasteless or too intense for its own good. You can make all those arguments, but you can't argue that it's there for a reason. And as a result, it stands head and shoulders above a significant number of other home invasion thrillers, slasher-type movies. This feels like a cousin of the slasher genre in a lot of ways. They are being stalked by basically a monster. They're trapped in a maze with a minotaur. It's a terrifying motion picture, and I'm glad we had a chance to talk about it because it came out to widespread acclaim. And then
made a lot of critics' top 10 lists that year, I recall.
And then it's only a couple of years ago, but it's just not quite talked about as much as I imagined it would be. When we think about like the great horror films of the decade, like a lot of people will bring up, you know, stuff like It Follows or The Babadook or
those two in particular kind of like overshadowed a lot of this wave of indie horror. Not that those aren't deserving films. Those are great movies, but those are the ones that are talked about most frequently.
And Don't Breathe is getting pushed to the side a little bit. And I'm glad we can kind of push it back into the foreground a bit, because if you missed this movie when it first came out, you really missed an intense motion picture experience. And if you watched it when it first came out, I recommend giving it a rewatch. There's actually a lot of layers to it, and it really functions as a very interesting, very well-tuned machine where every single piece of it is important later. Every single bit of it is thematically connected to the rest. When you look at a movie, I tend to look at the movie as plot, theme, and style. What happens, why it matters, and how it's presented. All of those elements are really just on fire in Don't Breathe.
They actually put the thought into it.
Yeah, and See No Evil, they just feel really perfunctory.
I was just looking up Fede Alvarez. He's going to do the sequel to The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
Like the new one. Like they're not going to deal with the other... it's a sequel to the David Fincher one, and they're going to skip the other two books that they made movies of abroad.
It's called The Girl in the Spider's Web, which is not one part of the book series.
And it stars Claire Foy from Unsane.
Yeah.
And I'm down. I like him as a director. I like Lisbeth Salander as a character.
I like David Fincher too, but that's one of his not good movies.
I don't care for that movie. I think the original Noomi Rapace trilogy is really cool.
The first one especially.
First one kicks ass. Like, it's just there's this really cool pulp thriller story that's anchored by a particularly spectacular performance. Like a lot of people really gave Rooney Mara a lot of credit for Elizabeth Salander, and her take on it, the character is interesting. Noomi Rapace is an inferno in the original Girl with the Dragon Tattoo trilogy. Yeah, well, she's fantastic in those movies.
I didn't like what Rooney Mara did to the character because they kind of inverted Elizabeth Salander in the American version. Because in the original, she dressed up like a punk because she wanted to just give a middle finger to everybody who saw her. She wanted to walk into the room and just say, I'm going to kick your ass because I hate you. Yeah, that's the message she wanted to give out. Rooney Mara was like...
kind of a wallflower
aspect. Yeah, she wanted to shrink down and pull a hoodie up and that sort of... She wanted to disappear. She wasn't confrontational, and I don't like that version of Elizabeth Salander because it's the opposite.
Yeah, when it's a film series that's very much about a woman sort of fighting back against a misogynistic world. And when in the David Fincher version, Rooney Mara asks Daniel Craig
is it when he rubs her back?
No, it's not even that. It's later in the film. She says, "Can I shoot that guy?" Elizabeth Salander would not
wouldn't ask his permission to shoot that guy.
No, like that feels like a totally different
she'd punch
version
Daniel,
of the character and some less interesting one.
She'd punch Daniel Craig for shooting first. It's like, I get to shoot that guy. You need to ask me permission.
Yeah.
That's Elizabeth Salander.
Yeah. We digress. Anyway, Don't Breathe is great. See No Evil. I've seen worse, but it's not good.
It's really not.
It's not a good movie. But next week we're going to do something a little different. We're going to talk about some movies that got really bad reviews when they first came out, but have since been kind of forgotten a little bit, at least by generations who weren't around when they were about. So we're going to talk about a couple of thrillers. The poll currently consists of Color of Night, an erotic thriller starring Bruce Willis.
Which I think people still talk about that one.
No one talks. People who were there when it came out talk about that one. No one else knows that movie. The Glass House, in which Lily Sobieski moves into a glass house.
Hey, remember Lily Sobieski?
I do.
Uh-huh.
And then your other option is The Juror, starring Demi Moore as a juror, and Alec Baldwin as a guy who wants to stop her from being a good juror. And Joseph Gordon-Levitt stars as her son. Weird.
Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Wow,
yeah, young Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Wow.
Weird.
I didn't see that one.
I didn't see that one either. I actually haven't seen either of those, any of those movies. Okay. So I know the reputation. And honestly, when last I checked, we put the poll up in the morning, it's a tight poll. Like, The Juror was number 1 for a while. Now it's number 3.
But only by a couple votes.
Like, it's really, your vote really matters. So head on over to the Schmelville Facebook page.
How mediocre can we get?
It's Schmelville ! Facebook page. There's also a Schmelville without an exclamation point. Make sure you go to the right one. And we have time for a couple of letters. So don't forget, you can email us letters@criticallyacclaimed.net. With your questions, concerns, critiques. We're pretty open, so just tell us what you want.
Here's a letter from Chris. Hello, Chris. Dear William, addicted to love, Bibiani.
I might as well face it.
And Whitney, I didn't mean to turn you on, Seibold. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I do that? I didn't mean to turn you on. I have something that has bugged me for a while, and it concerns the movie Big with Tom Hanks.
Got it.
The film, of course, is about a young boy who makes a wish, quote, to be big, and then becomes an adult overnight. But my question concerns the scene where Tom Hanks' character is about to have sex with Elizabeth Perkins, and it is implied that they do have sex.
Oh, they definitely do.
Oh, they do. Every moment I kept thinking to myself that this 13-year-old is about to have sex with a 30-year-old woman. He is in a 30-year-old body, but he is still a kid, and I see no one have any problem with that. What are your opinions on this?
We all kind of glossed over it when that movie came out, but it's another one of those things where it's like, yeah, that's creepy as fuck.
Yep.
It's a lot of movies that when you revisit them a little later with less forgiving attitudes about some really kind of deplorable behavior, they really change as time goes on. Like, Animal House is a lot grosser today.
I've never liked Animal House, but it's even grosser the more time passes. I was a big fan of Revenge of the Nerds until you realize, oh wait, there's a sexual assault scene that they don't really acknowledge.
They play up as though it's funny and romantic. That's not comfortable at all.
Big came out in the late 1980s.
Times were very different.
It was a different time, and this 13-year-old boy being staged as sort of like sexually experienced, or in this situation was played for laughs. And at the time, in Big.
Yeah.
At the time, people laughed at it because it was just written that way. It was written as a gag. doesn't really play that way anymore.
No, it's pretty freaking weird, is what it is. So you're not wrong.
At least it's an adult actor doing it, but it still has a lot of unsavory undertones.
Yeah, it's weird, and they play it as super romantic too.
Yeah,
and big. They play it as like really tender, and like it's like I don't know. That almost makes it worse. I don't know if it's possible. Like it's super strange.
Here's a letter from Brian. Hi, Brian. I watched Children of Paradise based on your recommendation. Good for you. Mm-hmm. It was incredibly impressive given the circumstances of its production. Recently, I was browsing through Turner Classic Movies and found a movie called The Moon is Blue. Based on a short description and being a fan of the director and stars, Otto Preminger, starring William Holden and David Niven, I decided to give it a chance without any real expectations. I came away really enjoying the film, and I think it stands as one of the best romantic comedies of its time. Are there any films you've watched that you didn't read reviews for, or weren't recommended, or that you didn't see a trailer for that you ended up enjoying? Also, have expectations become a detriment to modern film discourse? Thanks, Brian.
To answer your second question first, yes. I think they have.
Especially when it comes to gigantic blockbusters and the way they're sold to audiences.
I honestly think it is... People talk about the responsibility of a film critic. Like, why do we need film critics right now? And for me, a film critic exists, in a lot of respects...
To cut through that garbage.
To cut through it, because, like, marketing is lying to you. Always. Always lying to you on some small or huge way. Even if it's just telling you the movie is good. They might be wrong. Just trying to make a trailer that makes a terrible movie look good is kind of a lie. I mean, it's subjective, but they often know what they've got. So a film critic gets to tell you when, like, this movie, and like you're seeing billboards around everywhere and ads and everything, a film critic has the opportunity to tell you, that they're spending millions of dollars trying to tell you this is good. It's not. Or it's not as action-packed as they're making it sound. Or it's
a good film critic will be able to remain at least somewhat dispassionate, even if they're really looking forward to it. Kind of dispassionate when reporting the film to you. Yeah. Because it's their job to tell you how it is as a movie and not how it is as a phenomenon. Mm-hmm. Although they can, a good film critic can also report on that.
Your passion is not a film critic's responsibility.
Yeah.
If you read a film critic's review and you're less passionate about the movie, the film critic might very well have just done their job. Because maybe you need to lower your expectations a bit. Otherwise, your expectations might be too high or too low. Yeah. You might think this movie looks like crap, and then film critic actually says, no, actually, trust me, they're marketing it wrong. It's really good, and it's way more interesting than it looks. That's really important as a film critic. Expectations are everything right now, and what I think is interesting is that they're almost always, unless a movie is what we might call under or overrated, depending on how much hype is based on them, the conversation about them is always sort of before they come out.
Yeah.
Unless they're like award season contenders, and it persists. But usually it's like a couple of weeks before some movie comes out, everyone's talking about it, and then all that matters is whether or not the movie is any good. A film critic jumps to that point.
Yeah.
So that is super important.
Well, then the conversation continues and how much money it made, which who cares? Who cares? Who cares how much money it made?
Makes very little difference to most people.
You shouldn't care that.
As for the other thing, I see movies all the time that I know nothing about. It's one of the joys of being a film critic is that we sometimes get to see movies early, like before the hype train starts or before the commercial campaign begins, and we get to go in kind of blind. It's really great.
We're too busy. We're not, looking up film trailers. We're not going to. When we go to screenings, they don't give us trailers. Critic screenings are just the movie, so we are not necessarily as inundated with the marketing hype as perhaps an average filmgoer is. So we are a little bit more in the dark. We get to sort of live in a bubble, which is, you could say that's a privilege or a detriment if you like, but I'd consider it a privilege because we get to sort of view the films freshly. We get to let the film speak for itself rather than the studio just sort of telling us what it's supposed to be about. I'm trying to think of an instance where I was completely blind on a movie and I went to see it and I was kind of blown away. Oh, you know what? One morning I went to a staff meeting at the movie theater where I was working. It was early. It was like 8 a.m. I didn't want to be up that early. We got out at 10 a.m., which was when the film started screening. So I went to a nearby theater and saw that there was this new film that was called, like, the #1 smash comedy from Britain. It's like, oh, smash comedy from Britain. I'm a Monty Python fan. I like smash comedies from Britain. Little did I know that Train Spotting was not the smash comedy that I expected it to be.
Very different experience.
Yeah, and I was kind of blown away by Train Spotting because I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what to expect. It sort of grabbed me by the throat and threw me to the ground a little bit, and shaken for the rest of the day, but I was kind of happy that I went into that one blind.
If you want the experience of getting to see movies completely blind, I highly recommend seeking out film festivals. You might not be able to go to some of the big ones like Sundance, but there's a lot of smaller ones.
That's true.
And
those are only kind of relevant if you're in a big city, though.
But if you have an opportunity to go, I recommend it because they can be really exciting experiences, and you get to see something you just have no idea what you're about to see. I remember I was at Sundance. I think it was my first Sundance. No, it was my second Sundance. My second Sundance. The opening night
Sundance. Listen to you.
The opening night film was a film I knew nothing about but the title. I was just like, oh, cool. All right, well, it's the only thing playing tonight, so let's go. And so I'm there. I'm sitting next to a couple other film critics. We don't really know what we're about to see. All we know is that it's called Whiplash. And a lot of people have seen Whiplash. Whiplash is a fantastic motion picture. It's my number one movie of that year. I love Whiplash. It's an incredible motion picture. When you know nothing about it, and then that movie just starts playing, that movie is like someone just like set off a firecracker in the theater. Everyone just sits up.
Yeah.
Like, just, what the fuck is nice? I saw La La Land was the same way. Like, I saw La La Land. It was wasn't, I think, the premiere screening, but it was at a film festival. Most people hadn't seen it yet. I was sitting next to Scott Mantz, who ended up, this becoming his favorite movie ever. And I'm watching it, and I'm like, I don't know. Neat.
That's neat.
Yeah, I really liked it the first time I saw it, and then it just, over time, just
sort of faded.
Just saw the more flaws, and I still like it fine. I think it got built up a bit too much.
It's all right.
But it was still cool to see it without any of that huge hype. There was that whole Saturday Night Live sketch about interrogation sequence at a police station about why someone didn't like La La Land very much. It was a really funny sketch. So yeah, it's a real thing. Let's read another one. Here's one. This one is from Kenny Drew.
Hi, Kenny.
Hello, Bibbs and Whitney. Thank you for your interesting perspectives. Your podcast is a highlight of my week. Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you. I recently saw Annihilation and absolutely loved it. And I also recently rewatched 2001: A Space Odyssey. It got me thinking how hard it is to find good, heady science fiction in film these days. I'm trying to find other science fiction and fantasy films of the same type. Films that make you think or have inventive concepts. They don't have to be masterpieces. For example, I really appreciate Tarsem's The Cell for its interesting visual style and dreamlike quality. Can you recommend any underrated science fiction or fantasy films? Thanks much, Kenny.
If you're looking for to address your concern, Star Wars kind of eclipsed a lot of what science fiction was before that. I guess I suppose it would have to, but the thought of science fiction in a lot of in the popular consciousness is that it is sort of adventurous, thanks to the popularity of Star Wars. Whereas you go back and you read some of early sci-fi stories, and they really are kind of speculative, and a lot of them play out as morality plays, specifically in man's, I say man, I mean humanity's relationship to its own technology. And when it comes to making feature films, those are considered a gamble. A lot of more intellectual science fiction films really aren't made in the modern milieu any longer.
They are, but they tend to be very low budget.
Yeah,
you tend
to get stuff.
Films.
Yeah, you tend to get stuff like Annihilation. One that a lot of people really liked a few years back was Primer.
Primer is a great movie.
Because Primer, you really have to concentrate and maybe even take notes to follow.
It would probably help if you watch Primer 5 times in a row.
Yeah,
it's a time travel movie where you don't start realizing it seems like not a lot is happening, and then by the time you're done with it, you realized everything was always happening, always.
like 8 things were happening at once, and you didn't really understand it.
It's insanely complicated.
Yeah, and the technology is really kind of it's really banal. It's in garages and storage lockers and stuff, and there's no glowing blue lights. It's just you get in a tank and you travel back in time, and that's kind of it.
We've had a lot of great, because time travel doesn't have to be an expensive movie, depending on how far back you go and what kind of technology you use to go back in time. So there's a lot of good lower budgeted sci-fi time travel movies in particular lately. Primer's a good one. Time Crimes is one of my favorites.
I haven't seen Time Crimes.
Really? I thought no. It's so good. Yeah. Nacho Vigalondo directed it. He also did Colossal a couple of years ago. I think it was just last year.
Yeah.
It's about a guy who sees a woman doing something strange in the woods and sees a guy in a weird pink mask It looks like he's trying to kill her, and he gets involved. And what he realizes is he has found his way into and is now trapped in a time travel paradox. And seeing him gradually, and he's not a smart guy. Like, he's not like a science nerd who knows how it works. So he just keeps stumbling along and making everything worse always. It's really funny and really fatalistic and really interesting. Another good time travel one that slipped under a lot of radars was Predestination.
Yeah,
which is based on a Heinlein story.
Predestination is really, really terrific. It's a tiny little indie thing with Ethan Hawke that came out where it's about his relationship with a young woman and how their relationship over like the span of various time eras that we see kind of unfold kind of variously really sort of comes full circle as these time travel stories typically do, but in a way like much bigger than most of those typical time travel stories. I'm a big fan of Beyond the Black Rainbow.
Just gonna say, you probably are about to recommend Beyond the Black Rainbow. I was just about to say it.
Which is a lot more about its style, I think, than its thought, but it is really kind of dreamlike and heady and deals with a lot of like the logical extreme consequences. One everyone hated that I think brings up an interesting scientific concept that isn't addressed in science fiction stories a lot was Transcendence, the Johnny Depp film.
I think it's a bad movie with good ideas.
I appreciate, because you don't see this in science fiction movies a lot, that it addresses what the end goal of technology is supposed to be. And Transcendence is one of the only few films that says, well, you know, we keep trying to talk, you know, we're talking about artificial intelligence, we're talking about making androids, we're talking about, you know, giving sentience to machines, we essentially want to be lords of our own domain. We're trying to use technology to make ourselves into God. And this is a film that actually puts us in a position where we can do that, and how the world would freak out if we went a little too quickly.
Basically, it's the Lawnmower Man if all of the Lawnmower Man was the first 20 minutes, and then it just kept going.
Yeah.
But didn't get to Job's War. Like
So I appreciate a lot of the thought. I think the thriller elements are a little bit flat, but I think it's a better film than it gets credit for.
I think you're really hugging on to the ideas rather than the actual film itself, but fair enough. There's a lot of interesting science fiction films from the 70s that, again, because they don't have that like cool kind of action-packed kind of mentality, get looked over a lot. I'm thinking of a film like Silent Running with Bruce Dern, which was actually a huge influence on Mystery Science Theater 3000 in a roundabout way. But Silent Running, Bruce Dern plays a botanist who is taking care of the last forest, and the last forest is in a satellite. And after a while, progress in terms of like replicating food has made forests obsolete, and he is told to just let it die. And instead, he lets the satellite go free, and the satellite gets further and further away from the planet Earth, and he gets more isolated, and his attachment to the past, though noble, has tragic consequences. And that's a really complicated, you know, it's low budget, you know, you can laugh at some of the robot effects or whatever like that, but it's still really, really good. Another one I like that is a comedy, and is super crazy low budget, is Dark Star.
Oh, of course, Dark Star.
Dark Star is a lot of fun. Dark Star was John Carpenter's first feature film, and it's about a bunch of guys who are trapped in space. They are
blue-collar, bearded dudes.
Yeah.
They're bored.
It's all about how space travel isn't fun at all. They're trapped in a cramped spaceship. They hate each other. They long ago ran out of toilet paper, and the only thing they can do for fun is blow up planets.
They have nuclear bombs, like intelligent nuclear bombs that they use to blow up planets.
And one of the bombs has an existential crisis, which they have to deal with in a very weird way.
It's the climax of the film, but yeah, it is essentially a discussion with an artificially intelligent bomb and about sort of the nature of existence and death and fulfilling your function as a bomb. And no, you don't need to fulfill your function. But you know what Kierkegaard said? It's like... This is hilarious. This is amazing. This is a really great scene in this film that was made for a budget of like $100. It's really terrific.
It's a perfect example of what you can do with no money if you have a really good script.
Yeah,
the script costs the same amount. It's always paper and ink or word processing program.
I'm very fond of something you once said. It's that good dialogue doesn't cost anything extra.
Yeah. If you get the right person to write it the first time, anyway.
Just get a good writer, get some good dialogue in there. You can give your screenplay personality without losing any money.
All right, so those are some suggestions. If you watch them, let us know what you think. We're on Twitter at Critic Acclaim. I'm also at William Bibiani.
I'm at Whitney Seibel.
We have to wrap it up now because Whitney's got to go to work. But thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you, everybody, for writing. Again, letters at criticallyacclaimed.net. We will be back next week with reviews of Skyscraper, Hotel Transylvania 3, 8th Grade, and Don't Worry, He Won't Get Far on Foot, as well as the winner of the latest critically acclaimed poll on the Schmoville Facebook page. Be sure to join up. Check me out on Tuesday the 10th for my big movie trivia schmodown match against Jeff the In-Snyder Snyder. That's going to be a big one because that's going to determine whether or not I get a championship spot against Sam Levine. A big rematch.
Then you're going to get creamed by Sam Levine.
If I don't get creamed by Jeff Snyder first, we shall see.
If you get to go up against Sam Levine, and you're in the room with Sam Levine and you're doing film trivia, because he's been in this room with us and we've talked to him.
I've played Sam Levine. He kicked my butt.
Yeah,
it was. I had a rough second round, but it was a tough match.
Well, I guess we'll see how you do this next time. But yeah, if you end up going on to face Sam Levine, I predict
it's going to be.
He's going to mop the floor with you.
Thanks, Whitney. You're a good friend.
You're quite welcome. I have faith in you, except when you go up against Sam Levine.
All right, and don't forget you can check us out on our other podcast, Cancel Too Soon. We just did an episode about Legally Blonde, the series, and coming up, we're going to do an episode about the very short-lived CGI kids show about vans who are also vampires called Vampires.
That's a real thing.
That's an actual thing with music by John Entwistle from The Who.
Who appears in one episode.
Holy crap! So make sure you check that out. Thank you everybody for listening, and never forget, everyone's a critic.
I want to go to the midnight show. I'm sorry, what?